First principles thinking is a cognitive strategy in which complex problems are broken down into their most fundamental, undeniable truths. Psychologically, it forces the brain to disengage from assumptions, analogies, and conventional wisdom, encouraging analytical reasoning and original problem-solving. At its core, first principles involves two steps: decomposition and reconstruction. Decomposition is the process of stripping a problem to its foundational elements. For example, if you want to design a more efficient battery rather than copying existing designs, you ask, what are the basic physical and chemical constraints? What materials can store energy most efficiently? What are the fundamental laws governing energy transfer? By focusing solely on the irreducible truths, unnecessary complexity is removed. Neuroscience supports this approach. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for higher-order thinking, is activated when engaging in first principles reasoning. This activation enhances problem-solving, critical analysis, and adaptive learning. Studies indicate that individuals trained in this type of thinking demonstrate greater cognitive uncertain or novel situations. Reconstruction follows decomposition. After identifying the fundamental truths, the mind recombines them into innovative solutions. This process is iterative, requiring continuous testing, feedback, and refinement. For example, entrepreneurs like Elon Musk describe using first principles to rethink industries, reducing rockets to the cost of raw materials, then rebuilding a strategy from the ground up. Psychologically, this strengthens self-efficacy, the belief that one can generate solutions even in the absence of established models. As you reflect on this, consider your own thought patterns. Notice where you rely on assumptions versus where you can strip problems to their core elements. Mentally practice breaking down complex ideas into fundamentals and observe how clarity and focus emerge. The mind becomes more organized, less cluttered by unnecessary connections. This focused awareness, when paired with calm breathing, prepares the brain to transition into restful states, promoting both cognitive clarity and relaxed sleep. Second order thinking is the cognitive process of anticipating not just the immediate effects of an action, but also the subsequent consequences that follow from those initial effects. While first-order thinking focuses on simple cause and effect, second-order thinking requires predicting chains of consequences, often multiple steps removed from the initial decision. Psychologically, most people default to first-order thinking because it is faster and cognitively less demanding. The brain takes mental shortcuts, relying on heuristics or past patterns to make decisions. Second-order thinking, in contrast, activates the prefrontal cortex more intensely. This region is responsible for planning, foresight, working memory, and executive control, allowing an individual to hold multiple possible outcomes in mind simultaneously. For example, imagine a policymaker deciding to implement a tax cut to stimulate the economy. First-order thinking sees an immediate increase in disposable income and consumer spending. Second-order thinking goes further. How might this affect inflation? How could it influence government debt? What social or behavioral changes could result indirectly? By considering these secondary and tertiary effects, more informed and adaptive decisions can be made. Research in behavioral economics demonstrates that individuals trained in second-order thinking tend to avoid impulsive or reactive decisions. They anticipate unintended consequences, reduce cognitive biases, and engage in reflective strategic planning. This capacity also strengthens emotional regulation because understanding downstream effects reduces anxiety caused by unexpected outcomes. As you the concept to your own thought patterns, observe situations where you react immediately versus where you pause and analyze cascading consequences. Mentally simulate potential outcomes, recognizing the interconnectedness of actions and reactions. This exercise enhances cognitive clarity and self-control. By guiding your awareness in this structured, deliberate way, your mind begins to organize itself, reduce unnecessary cognitive noise, and enter a calmer, more focused state. Each thought becomes a measured consideration, allowing your brain to a restful state, supporting both mental clarity and the onset of sleep. The concept of a circle of competence refers to the areas in which an individual has deep knowledge, experience, and reliable judgment. Psychologically, staying within this circle reduces cognitive overload and decision-making errors because the brain can efficiently process information in domains it understands well. Venturing outside this circle often increases uncertainty, triggers stress responses, and can lead to overconfidence or misjudgment. When combined with first principles thinking, the circle of competence becomes not just a boundary, but a framework for structured problem solving. First principles. Thinking encourages breaking complex problems down to their fundamental truths, while the circle of competence guides you in applying this approach where your knowledge is most reliable. For example, consider an investor evaluating a technology startup. Using first principles, the investor might analyze the product from the ground up. What problem does it solve? What are the underlying technical constraints? What resources and skills are required to execute effectively? The circle of competence. The investor interprets these analyses only within areas they truly understand, say software engineering and market dynamics, rather than attempting to evaluate biochemical innovations outside their expertise. Neurologically, this combined approach engages multiple cognitive systems. The prefrontal cortex manages reasoning and planning, while the anterior cingulate cortex monitors for errors and cognitive conflicts. By staying within one circle of competence, the brain reduces unnecessary activation of stress-related regions like the amygdala, which improves clarity and decision-making. This by stripping away assumptions and reducing cognitive noise, allowing more accurate and innovative solutions. Behaviorally, this synergy leads to disciplined risk-taking and strategic thinking. Individuals focus their efforts where they have both competence and the ability to analyze problems from first principles. They avoid overextension, reduce exposure to cognitive biases, and increase the likelihood of sustainable success in complex environments. As you consider this, mentally identify your own circle of competence. Reflect on areas where your knowledge is solid and reliable, and where it is limited. Then, within your strong domains, apply first principles reasoning, break problems into fundamental truths, analyze systematically, and reconstruct solutions. This deliberate awareness calms cognitive turbulence, organizes mental processes, and reduces uncertainty. Your mind, clear and structured, prepares naturally for restful sleep as every analyzed thought becomes a steady anchor of understanding. A thought experiment is a cognitive tool that allows the mind to explore complex ideas, hypotheses, or scenarios without physical experimentation. Psychologically, it leverages imagination and reasoning to simulate outcomes, anticipate consequences, and test theories in a safe, controlled mental space. This method is widely used in philosophy, physics, cognitive science, and behavioral studies to investigate problems that are difficult or impossible to replicate in reality. At its core, a thought experiment involves defining a situation, isolating variables, and mentally projecting potential results. For example, consider Schrödinger's famous thought experiment in quantum mechanics. A cat placed in a hypothetical box is simultaneously alive and dead until observed. While purely theoretical, this experiment forces the mind to confront the counterintuitive implications of quantum superposition. Psychologically, engaging with such scenarios strengthens abstract reasoning, increases cognitive flexibility, and promotes the ability to consider multiple perspectives simultaneously. Thought experiments are also used in decision-making and strategy. Imagine a business leader trying to evaluate the long-term effects of a major policy change. Instead of relying solely on historical data, they mentally simulate different outcomes, economic shifts, employee behavior, market reactions, and social consequences. By systematically analyzing these hypothetical scenarios, they anticipate risks, identify opportunities, and refine strategies without exposing themselves to immediate real-world consequences. Neuroscientifically, performing thought experiments activates the prefrontal cortex, associated with planning, problem-solving, and working memory. It also engages the reasoning. This neural activity strengthens the ability to hold multiple outcomes in mind, evaluate probabilities, and make more informed, deliberate choices. As you reflect on this, consider conducting your own mental experiments. Choose a scenario relevant to your life, define the key variables, and project the possible outcomes step by step. Observe how your mind tests solutions, anticipates challenges, and integrates knowledge. This focused cognitive engagement organizes mental processes, reduces random thoughts, and creates a calm, structured awareness. Thought systematically analyzed, your mind becomes prepared to relax, letting restful sleep arrive naturally and efficiently. Probabilistic thinking is the cognitive process of evaluating outcomes based on likelihood rather than certainty. Unlike deterministic thinking, which assumes that actions lead to predictable results, probabilistic thinking acknowledges uncertainty, variability, and risk. Psychologically, it trains the brain to estimate probabilities, weigh evidence, and make informed decisions in conditions of incomplete information. For example, consider an investor deciding whether to buy a stock. Deterministic thinking might assume, if the company reports growth, multiple outcomes. There is a 60% chance the stock rises due to growth, a 20% chance of a market correction offsetting gains, and a 20% chance of unexpected events affecting the company. By assigning likelihoods, probabilistic thinkers make more informed, resilient decisions. Neurologically, probabilistic reasoning engages the prefrontal cortex and parietal lobes. The prefrontal cortex manages executive functions such as planning and working memory, while the parietal lobes contribute to numerical reasoning and risk evaluation. Behavioral studies show that trained in probabilistic thinking are less prone to cognitive biases like overconfidence, hindsight bias, and availability heuristics. This enhances adaptive decision-making in uncertain or complex environments. Probabilistic thinking also has applications in daily life beyond finance or science. For instance, when planning travel, one may assess the probability of traffic delays, weather disruptions, or public transportation failures. By mentally assigning likelihoods to each event, a person can prepare contingencies, reducing stress and increasing predictability. As you reflect on this, visualize your mind as a system evaluating multiple possibilities, each with its own likelihood. Notice how your cognitive processes become more structured, how uncertainty is no longer threatening, and how your brain learns to navigate complexity calmly. This deliberate assessment of probabilities strengthens clarity, reduces impulsive reactions, and gradually induces a state of mental relaxation, preparing the brain to transition smoothly into restful sleep.